welcome again to another edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I am Rabbi Richard Address, your host and the director of Jewish Sacred Aging. Welcome and thank you for joining us. As you know, these podcasts are designed to explore some of the issues related to our own aging, the implications of longevity for our families and our community. And we welcome your comments and suggestions to me, Rabbi Address at jewishsacredaging.com. And we'd also like to invite you to visit our Facebook page, Jewish Sacred Aging on Facebook, and click on the like button or thingy, whatever you do. We have a special treat for you today, coming to us from Israel, Richard Brownstein, who is the author of the Holocaust Cinema Complete book, who lectures at Yad Vashem on Holocaust issues. And welcome, Richard. It's very, very nice to see you. I hope everything is well with you today, Ba'aretz, and that you're well and safe and vaccinated. And thank you for joining us here on Seekers of Meaning. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. 3 vaccinations and no wars. So I can't complain.
You're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the game. This is absolutely fascinating, and thank you again for joining us. You've created this book, Holocaust Cinema Complete. It's I think 400 edits, examinations, critiques, backgrounds of Holocaust films. You lecture for this at Yad Vashem. You lecture with the International Holocaust Studies. There's a website that you've created, which is
www.holocaustfilm.com.
holocaustfilm.com.
Films. holocaustfilms.com.
Plural. I guess the obvious first question is, how did you get into this?
Well, when I was a kid, I became interested in the Holocaust because of the miniseries that ABC had called QB7, which was the first miniseries ever made. And it was based on Leon Uris's novel about a Nazi doctor who is discovered, played by Anthony Hopkins, long before Silence of the Lambs. And then I read the novel when I was 16, and I was hooked. When I was in college, I was teaching at a religious school, Holocaust Studies, and I was on the board of the Oregon Holocaust Resource Center, and kept studying and kept teaching. And then I moved to Los Angeles and completely unrelated, got into the entertainment industry in production. And at the same time, I created a company that most people are aware of, but don't know that it was my company. At the end of Nightline or Oprah or NPR, they say, if you'd like a transcript of this show. And that was my company, which I had about 100 employees and contractors, sold it. I moved to Israel with my family in 2003. And I had been studying film. I had been watching film. I had been taking notes. And I had a cousin who was on the Young Judea year course program who told me that she was taking a film about a course about Jewish film. And I asked her what she was studying. She said Private Benjamin, which is not a Jewish movie. And I was so distressed that I went to the educational director of Young Judea, and I said, I'll teach a course for free about Holocaust film. And I developed my methods and ideas about Holocaust films doing that. And then my daughter in 2014 was 17, and somebody had seen her speak to a class after coming back from Poland about her experiences at Auschwitz. And so she was asked to speak at Yad Vashem to an international conference. And she said, Daddy, I have protexia. you can come to any of these seminars this weekend. And I saw a seminar that was about using the documentary, the 9.5-hour documentary show on the classroom. And unknown to her, I called up the director of the seminar and I said, I'd like to be on the panel because I think it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You can't use a 9.5-hour documentary pedagogically unless it's to graduate students. They're not going to watch it. They're not going to understand it. He said, well, the programs are printed, but we need a film expert up here. And that's how I got to Yad Vashem. And then I wrote the book.
What makes a good Holocaust film? Because you in your work and in the book, you really you discuss, even some critiques of some the most popular films. We'll get into it. What makes a good Holocaust film? What does it have to have?
Well, what makes a good Holocaust film today is different from what it was in the 1960s and 70s. Back then, you didn't need veracity; you needed emotion. Since Life is Beautiful in 1997, nobody really wanted to see a fictional death camp film. And so the hallmarks of great Holocaust films, at least victim films and righteous Gentile films, are that they don't violate history too much. That's to start. So all films, Holocaust or not, have to start with a great story. After that, the actors and the dialogue and the costumes, the editing, they can make it a great film. But you have to start with a great story. After that, you really get into the message that they're bringing. So a very celebrated film is The Reader. Kate Winslet got her first Oscar from that. It's the story of a woman in East Germany not long after the war who's illiterate. And she makes a sketchy deal with a young man that he reads to her in exchange for sex. Okay? And then we find out that this poor woman was a Nazi guard who locked 300 Jews in a barn and burnt it down. And she is then put on trial for that. And we're supposed to feel sorry for this woman who can't defend herself properly because she's illiterate. It's absurd. So the message matters. There's the same message in The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, where we're supposed to feel sorry for this Nazi commandant and his family when their boy is killed in a death camp. It stretches all senses of morality. So bad films have bad messages and distort the Holocaust. Good, you can be a bad film and be accurate, but you can't be a good film and really ruin the message of the Holocaust.
So one of the questions, because you just alluded to the passage of time and what true in, let's say, the 50s and 60s may not be true in the first decade or two of the 2000s, but with the survivor generation dying out, moving forward, how do you think the making of a film that focuses on the Holocaust is going to change 10, 15 years from now? When that generation is gone, do you think there's going to be a different style of film that's going to approach this to retrieve that memory, or will it go back to veracity rather than? I mean, that's because we're going to face this, obviously.
I don't believe that any of the films that are being made now are dependent upon survivors' memories. All of the memories have been chronicled. Many of the memories have been chronicled by the Shoah Foundation and Yad Vashem and many others. There were enough stories 20 years ago, 30 years ago to fill theaters forever. what we're finding in this, I break down Holocaust film production into 4 eras. The post-war era, from 1945 until 1973, they didn't know much about what they were doing. You had films like The Diary of Anne Frank, which didn't barely mention the Holocaust. It ends when she leaves the attic, which is really does not tell the most important part of her story. And The Pawnbroker, which deals almost allegorically with suffering during that period. You had a few really good films like The Finzi Contini and Cabaret, but nobody was looking to those for education. Then you get to the commercial era, where you have Holocaust, the miniseries, and Schindler's List until '96. Television movies start to proliferate, and they're trying to find their way. How do you have on TV? How do you sell soap and Volkswagens when you're making and when you have commercial breaks in Holocaust shows? And then you have the mature era from '97 until about 2013, where really the great films are made. Since then, in what I call the consolidated era, there are a lot of Holocaust films being made, but most of them are remakes of previous films, Eichmann films and Anne Frank films, and remakes of Out of the Ashes and many other films. So half of the films that are being made now are based on remakes. Occasionally, a great film comes out, like 1945, a brilliant film that you didn't need. It could have been made at any time. Somebody just figured it out that this is how you do it. So I don't think that that the survival of memories is going to be a problem for filmmaking.
You have a favorite director? In your studies and as you analyze these hundreds and hundreds of Holocaust movies, do you have one or two directors who you really think got it?
Well, certainly I believe Tim Blake Nelson got it. He was the director of what I consider to be the greatest Holocaust film ever made, called The Gray Zone, which was released the weekend of 9/11, which is why no one's ever heard of it. It stars Steve Buscemi and Harvey Keitel and David Arquette and a bunch of other people who you'd recognize. And it's the story of the revolt at Birkenau, which most people don't know happened, and the destruction of crematorium. That story alone is needed to be told. The way he told the story, it was unique. He didn't drowned it out with a soundtrack. There is no soundtrack. You hear the background, so you don't feel like you're being taken through Schindler's List with John Williams violins going off. He lets the actors speak the way the actors speak, so we're not tortured by accents like we were when David Schwimmer was trying to put on an accent in Uprising, or Liam Neeson in Schindler's List. And the dialogue itself is like something that Mamet would have done. That it says several things at once and connects with us. The real test of that story was that it was remade. It was basically ripped off by a director who turned it into an Academy Award-winning film for Best Foreign Language called Son of Saul. And if you compare the two, you see the difference between high school basketball and the NBA. I mean, you really can see somebody who can handle what they're doing and doesn't make it about them, but makes it about the art. So Tim Blake Nelson is certainly one. Sidney Lumet, who only made one Holocaust film, The Pawnbroker, I'm a huge admirer of him.
Remember that movie?
Bob Fosse, who made Cabaret. He didn't make a lot of films, but that was great. Certainly Hal Ashby. I adored Hal Ashby, who made Harold and Maude, and Being There, although Being There is not a Holocaust film, and many other films. I'm a great admirer of a lot of filmmakers.
In one of the interviews that I saw that you did, I think for JTA, you were talking about the films and everything. And again, we're talking with Richard Brownstein, who's a author of Holocaust Cinema Complete and lectures on Holocaust studies at Yad Vashem. You mentioned that in watching these, you quote, you can't be drawn in, unquote, and that struck me. What do you mean by that?
Well, you're watching a Holocaust film, and it is innately depressing. And you have, certainly as a critic, but as a viewer too, you have to be balanced. People are dying. People are going to die. And just because people are dying or their gas chambers or shooting squads or whatever it is, that doesn't innately make it a great film. So there are people who just think that if they splatter the screen with enough blood, that they've made a good film, and it doesn't work that way. We're critical with art, regardless of the subject, and this is an art form, and kitsch is there just like it is in any art form, and there's a fine line in all art between reaching an audience and pandering to an audience.
You also talk about your teaching, and you allude to the 9.5 hour documentary with a class. That would be really difficult. What do you, as a lecturer, as an expert on this, what's the best way to teach pedagogically to deal with the Holocaust in this day and age? Because religious schools continue to teach about it. There's Holocaust studies in colleges. What's the best way? But if you're looking at a teenage audience, like say confirmation class, as opposed to people of our generation, what's the best way to get this message across?
Well, that's a really great question. I spent a chapter in my book describing the best way to do this. And my answer there is that there is no one answer. It depends on how long you have to teach. So if you're teaching for an hour, or you're teaching for 5 hours, or an entire semester, the answer is different. If you're teaching a homogeneous class of Orthodox Jews, it's completely different from if you're teaching a heterogeneous class of mixed population. If they're from Israel, it's one thing. If they're from New York, it's another thing. If they're from Portland, it's another thing. And the national identities are different. The way that the Holocaust is taught in some places is a form of Zionism. They try to make that the message, which I don't think there should be any message other than we're teaching what the Holocaust is. But in other places, they teach it as a way to make people more religious, and other people may do it as a form of apostasy. I can't say specifically that without knowing exactly the circumstances of a class. But what I can say, absolutely, is that Holocaust films are not Holocaust education. They're supplemental. So if you're going to teach a class about Auschwitz, then a film about Auschwitz may cement in the lesson. But anybody who thinks that they're going to get away with Holocaust education simply by putting on a movie is not doing the work, and they're not going to get the results.
You in your interviews and in the book, you really, as we've alluded to, go into depth in a lot of these films. The under the radar films, if I can use that phrase, the ones that aren't the big blockbusters that got all the attention, but what would you say if somebody wants to look at some of these very small? I mean, you mentioned the gray zone, which I'm not mistaken. I think I read that they're trying to bring that back, or either on a streaming service or something, and make it available because it got lost in 9/11. But what would you say are some of your most favorite under the radar films that really just never got the popular, play?
Well, there is a fantastic survivor film called Birch Tree Meadow, which, as I have written, is really the only survivor film that ever needed to be made. Of 86 survivor films, it could have been alone. It's about a French woman in the latter part of her life who goes back to Birkenau, slips in between the barbed wire, and comes to grips with her experience. And it was the actress is famous. The director was a survivor. They were both Jews. And it deals directly with the experience of surviving, as opposed to one of my favorite movies, Harold and Maude, which is about a survivor, but it's not in a class of I mean, it's just not a serious survivor film in that way. There are many great Holocaust comedies, surprisingly, and one of my favorites, which is very hard to find, is called Genghis Cohen. It's a British film, and it's about a Jew who's a stand-up comedian, and he's at a ravine and he's being killed by a Nazi commander. And the last thing he says in Yiddish is "kiss my ass," and he's killed. And 10 years later, this commandant is the police commissioner in a West German town, and the Jew comes back as a ghost and haunts him. It's absolutely a wonderful, entertaining film that gets to the crux of not only what the Jews went through, but of the insinuation of Germans into West German bureaucracy. There's another comedy that I have seen recently that's on Netflix, surprisingly, called Mein Führer, which is about the very last days, just before Berlin is going to fall. Hitler needs to give a big speech, and his advisors are worried that he doesn't have quite the energy he needs, the hatred of the Jews. So they call in a very annoying acting coach to get under his skin. And this film does the right things that Charlie Chaplin failed to do in The Great Dictator. It's really the right way that The Great Dictator should have been done. And for those who loved Jojo Rabbit, they should see either of those films, the Mein Führer or Genghis Cohen, and then they'll see what real great Holocaust comedies are. And another one is called The Train of Life, which was about a group in Poland, shtetl, that figured out what was going to happen and engineered a train to take them to Palestine. It's funny,
Huh.
smart, and it tells a great story.
So you write that you have some issues with Schindler's List. So before we run out of time, um, that was the movie. We all remember seeing it, and it was I think so many rabbis preached on it and people taught on it. What was what was good about it? What was less than satisfactory in your opinion?
Well, I have the greatest respect for Steven Spielberg and for him having financed the Shoah Foundation at USC with profits from Schindler's List. And more people have learned about the Holocaust because of Schindler's List than anything else other than perhaps Holocaust, the miniseries. That aside, artistically, um, I can't really advocate for a film that is about a Nazi saving Jews from Nazis. There are many righteous Gentile films that that don't need to that don't go there. There are far more uh, uh, there are far more Jews who were saved by other people who suffered more than Schindler. Uh, Raoul Wallenberg and Sugihari and Sousa Mendes and others who famously were shunned. And there are great films about these people. I also, from an artistic standpoint, I have a difficult time understanding why an hour and a half story needs to be 3 hours and 15 minutes. I am very troubled by the shower fake-out scene where Spielberg created a fake shower. If where the Jews showered, it was a shower. It wasn't a gas chamber shower. It was open, and he made it seem like the Jews who were going in there knew that they were going to be gassed, which was not true. And he did it in a way that was no different from in Indiana Jones, where he threw Harrison Ford into a snake pit. He just did it to freak out the audience. There is no purpose to that scene. I also object to the final scene where that's in Israel at Oskar Schindler's grave, where he's deified with Spielberg's shadow over the whole thing. It was so absurd, with Yerushalayim Shel Zahav in the background, that in the Israeli version, it was Eli Eli that was played, because everybody knows that Yerushalayim Shel Zahav is about a unified Jerusalem after the 6-Day War, and so he's conflated the existence of the state of Israel with the Holocaust, which is not the Zionist point of view, and it's inappropriate. But the filmmaking is beautiful. I mean, he can tell a story, but he took the least probable story of a Nazi saving Jews, which is what Spielberg does. He takes the most impossible story and he makes it possible, and he does it in a way that you can't take your eyes away from it. And so you have to think hard about what you're watching.
Richard Brownstein, the author of Holocaust Cinema Complete. This is the book is available through the usual, Amazon and the usual bookstores type of stuff. And your website is, give us the website again.
www.holocaustfilms.com. holocaustfilms.com.
Last question, easy one. When you sit down and watch a movie about the Holocaust, what do you, Richard Brownstein, want to see?
Well, when I watch any movie, I'm rooting for it. I start there. I want it to succeed. And I recently watched a film called The Auschwitz Report, which was also entitled The Auschwitz Escape. And it was about these two people a true story, who escaped with papers to prove to the Red Cross that they had been fooled. And that was an important message. The movie starts with one of the people who was escaped being hung on the gate at Auschwitz. And I'm sitting there waiting to understand why this man who survived and was not hung was shown there hung at the beginning. And they spend the first hour and a quarter on the run and torturing and prisoners being tortured. And the story that was important gets 15 minutes at the end. I can't. It's not something I can recommend. So I'm looking for a complete story. I'm looking for a good story. I'm looking for great filmmaking and the entire mosaic of filmmaking. That's what I'm looking at.
Richard, thank you very, very much. We hope just stay safe and stay well. And if a colleague here wants to bring you in, I guess by Zoom to their congregation, how do they reach you? Did they go to that website?
Yeah, my contact information is at holocaustfilms.com. And in fact, I would be very honored to speak. I've spoken via Zoom at retirement homes more than once. But anybody who has an idea about how to get this out, people assume that if you can write a book, you can also publicize it, and it's not necessarily true. So
that's true.
If anybody who has ideas about how to get the message out about the book, I will be grateful and thankful. And yes, go to holocaustfilms.com, and I'll be sure to let you know what. I'll get back to you.
Well, thank you. For those of you who are watching this and are wondering what is all that stuff behind this man, unfortunately, it's a very sad series of articles when his Portland Trailblazers beat our Philadelphia 76ers. But that's another story for another time. But anyway, it's pretty cool to see regardless. So, Richard, again, thank you. Thank you very much. Continued good luck. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we really appreciate your work. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi. To all of you, it was a great honor.
My pleasure, believe me. To all of you, again, thank you for watching or listening to today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the TV show and podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. If you'd like to make a donation, tax-free donation to help us continue these podcasts and our work, go to the website, jewishsacredaging.com, scroll down to the conveniently located donate button, click on it, and just follow the prompts. We want to thank our producer, Steve Lubetkin, because these podcasts are recorded at the Lubetkin Media Company's headquarters in beautiful Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Again, thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Adres, and until we see each other again, stay safe, stay well, shalom.